Well, folks, we've already got the nerfs announced, and apparently they're coming later this week. Let's talk about it.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, 7 cards getting nerfed. I'll run through them real quickly here, just so you can see which ones we're going to talk about in more detail here shortly. But some big impacts to the meta inevitably coming. Big changes to Galakrond decks. Dragon Queen Terraza getting a little bit of a nerf, and Deathholder Rogue getting a big hit too. So that said, let's start there with Necrarium Apothecary. This one's going up to 5 mana from 4 mana. And yeah, I mean, Deathholder Rogue doesn't have like a crazy high win rate right now, but there are some statistics for Necrarium Apothecary itself that suggest its win rate power spikes way too hard when it gets coined out, say, early in the game, or sometimes even played on turn 4. It can just like steal games out from under you, which makes it feel very much like a coin flip. Like, did they draw the Apothecary or not? And even though that gets averaged out to a reasonable win rate across the board, it still creates some pretty bad, feel bad experiences for people where games just kind of get lost and there's nothing you could do about it. So I think moving this to 5 does slow down that power spike a little bit, gives decks more time to find answers, removal, maybe just kill them in the meantime. So I think this does help reduce some of those negative experiences for people, but it also reduces the win rate of the deck fairly substantially as well, I think. I mean, for all the same reasons it feels better to play against it, it also gets a little weaker. And Deathholder Rogue's already not amazing. It's a mid-tier 2 deck right now, according to HS Replay, and it will probably fall to, low tier 2 to tier 3, I think, with this change. So this is not something you're probably going to see as much in the ladder, although will still remain a pretty fun deck that can still occasionally steal some wins with crazy charge minions and Anubis Warbringer buffs and so on. So I think a good change for the game ultimately, if not one I was necessarily like pining for. I think people will probably have a better time in Hearthstone because of this difference. So now let's move over to Galakrond Shaman actually getting 2 more nerfs. Galakrond Shaman was so good. You couldn't nerf it just once, you had to nerf it twice. First up, Invocation of Frost going to 2 mana, and this is no shocker. I've been talking about how crazy this card is. It was just a strictly better Glacial Shard in the past. It was a Glacial Shard that summoned you a 2/1 with Rush. Glacial Shard was a great card. Invocation of Frost at 1 was absurd, and at 2 mana, I think this still remains a pretty decent feeling card. Like, this is still going to get played, and it's still going to feel pretty powerful. For the people playing it, it'll still feel bad sometimes to play against it too. So I think this is a great change. Pulls it much more in line with where it should be. Slows down Galakrond Shaman just a little bit, but doesn't completely kill or remove their ability to play well. So I'm happy to see this one go to 2. I think it was kind of flying under the radar for a lot of people, but this was one of my most annoying cards in the entire set. How good and how kind of sleepy, surprisingly good it really was. So also for Shaman, this is one everybody was calling for, and I certainly didn't disagree. Dragon's Pack is getting changed, staying at the same mana cost, but the buff is going from 3/3 down to 2/2. So instead of getting 5/6 taunt minions, they're only going to get 4/5 taunt minions. And that is a pretty big distinction. There's a lot of things that deal 5 damage that don't deal 6, so that's going to make for some nice breakpoints across the meta for a bunch of different decks. Because Faceless Corruptor got nerfed, it's still going to retain that positive breakpoint over Corruptor, which is kind of funny. They both got changed to line up once again. But again, just reducing some of the crazy power turns from Galakrond Shaman, which is totally fine. There were some pretty bad moments in Galakrond Shaman when Dragon's Pack, particularly with Electrostorm Surge, would just completely overturn the game and steal it right out from under you. And if this helps reduce that opportunity at all, that's good news to me. Frankly, I still think it seems kind of insane. Getting 2 big 4/5 taunts for 5 mana is ridiculous. So I think this card's still going to be very, very good, and Galakrond Shaman will still be powerful too. Just going to reduce that power level a little bit, which is exactly what a nerf should be. Adjust the deck to a healthy spot without completely killing it, and I think both of these do that effectively. So next up, let's move over to Warrior with Ankar here, going down to 2 durability instead of 3 durability. Now, I talked about this a little bit in a previous video, how I actually think a mana change would have been better for Ankar here, because it's really the first couple attacks of Ankar that make it so powerful in my mind. It's just like that instant reload where you've got enough room to keep going, like for another turn or two. And usually Pirate Warrior's winning in that turn or two because they're finding lethals. They're just keeping that pressure up enough to overrun their opponent. So by the time we get to that third Ankar attack, like, yeah, it still matters sometimes, but far less often than like even the first durability or the second durability. So for me, I would have pushed Ankar to 4 mana to slow it down from a tempo standpoint and less try to address the sort of value generation off of it, because it doesn't need the full value generation anyway, I don't think. I would have addressed tempo instead, because right now there's really no punishment to playing Ankar. You get that value and you still get a pretty strong tempo play on turn 3 as well. So, I mean, yes, this will make the deck marginally weaker, but I think this is a pretty small nerf to Pirate Warrior overall. Ankar will still remain a very strong card, and I think Pirate Warrior stands to gain a little bit too much ground, actually, given some of the bigger nerfs around it in the meta. This is such a small adjustment. I'm a little concerned that it wasn't quite enough, which I rarely say for nerfs, but I almost wish this one had gone a little bit farther, because this was the one thing I was keeping a close eye on for nerfs that seemed very influential in the meta. So we'll have to keep an eye on it and see how it pans out. Maybe it really does do more than I thought. I'm curious what you guys think about Ankar in the comments below. And then, of course, the other problem for Warrior here is Scion of Ruin for Galakrond Warrior instead of Pirate Warrior, and this guy going to 4 is a really big deal. This card is just nuts at 3 mana. It's good early in the game as a tempo play, but it was also just crazy when you would draw it off of your Galakrond and be able to play it immediately at that 10 mana breakpoint. That's no longer possible. Now Scion of Ruin pushes you to 11 mana total when played alongside Galakrond, which means you slow down both the early game, which is nice, but also that late game power as well. So this is a pretty big hit to Galakrond Warrior, but nonetheless, I think the deck stays good, and I think Scion of Ruin is still really good at 4 mana if you look at it. It's still like better than Restless Mummy, which was completely insane, right? And still pretty good if you play it the next turn on Galakrond, right? You can only just wait a turn and still absolutely swing the game. So this card still scares me a little bit, but definitely a change in the right direction, and hopefully a little bit of a limitation towards what Galakrond Warrior can do, which I do think right now is quite a bit. So finally here, heading over to Fiendish Rites, the final Galakrond nerf. This one to Warlock, going to 4 mana from 3 mana. So basically slowing down the follow-up here a little bit, where those mid-game boards could get really powerful off of Fiendish Rites. Like, not only are you cementing the board presence with additional minions, but you're making everything really scary with attack values as well. That could often be back-breaking for a lot of decks to deal with. It would just be too much early pressure. So denying that a little bit by a mana is nice, but also just making this feel less good of a play on its own. Suddenly 4 mana for 2/2/1s is like, ugh. Whereas for 3 mana, you were pretty happy to do that sometimes. So I think this is a really substantial change. I think Galakrond Warlock still stays good, again, which is nice. That's by design, I'm sure. But this will slow it down a little bit and help other decks catch up and kind of stay there when it comes to damage. So it gets less of those just like free, overwhelming wins where you just run over them and there's nothing that they could do. And I am shocked. People thought this card was going to be terrible, and here we are. It's getting nerfed. What a world we live in. And then finally here, the last change is to Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and I think this is actually a pretty tiny baby nerf. Basically, it's all staying the same, except that Alexstrasza can no longer chain into an Alexstrasza, which definitely was, you know, that thing that won a game like 1 in 100 times, right? It's very rare for Alexstrasza to hit another Alexstrasza. It's actually never happened to me, I don't think. I've never doubled Alexstrazzas, and I've played a lot. I mean, I don't know how many dragons are in standard, probably something like 50 to 75. So, you know, it's not actually probably 1 in 100. It's probably higher odds than that. But nonetheless, not adding a big difference here to any given deck's percentages. It's going to be a very small change. Nothing is going to adjust from the meta. It's just going to feel a lot better. And that's a good thing. Like, keep the meta the same for this card. Decks don't change power level, but nobody's having a really, really bad time when you chain 3 Dragon Queen Alexstrasas into each other and steal an unwinnable game. I think it just makes the game a little bit more fun for everybody, and that's a good thing. So that said, that wraps it up on these nerfs. I think we've got some really good changes here. I wasn't like clamoring for nerfs. I was a little worried about Ankar's power level in some ways. A lot of these cards were frustrating to me. I was fine keeping them as is, But I think these changes will increase my enjoyment in Hearthstone, and I think that'll be true for a lot of people. Plus, some good dust refunds, potentially cards like Dragon's Pack being an epic card. That's not something we normally see getting nerfed, so that's good. Ankar and Scion of Ruin, also high rarity cards getting nerfed. And I guess Dragon Queen Terraza probably going to get an adjustment as well. So some people might make out with some dust out of this, which is a good deal too. All that said, I think this is a great balanced change. I wasn't excited about it, but given the results, I think I'm pretty happy. That said, what do you guys think? You happy? You sad? Does it frustrate? Oh, Apothecary's epic too. Oh my god, they're all epics. That's crazy. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe you hate it. I'm curious to hear why. I like it, but time will tell, and we'll see very soon. Apparently, in the next few days, when this apparently hits the live servers, we'll know just what the meta looks like shortly after. I think basically things will stay roughly the same. We might see a deck move up a spot or two, or down. Ultimately, I don't think anything's going to totally come out of nowhere or shift in a really big direction. That said, thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.